Okay, so it is Nutcracker season, and I wanted to do this video on how to best prepare for your very first Nutcracker being a freelancer, because it's quite an experience. And I say that because most likely your first experience playing the Nutcracker is going to be as a last minute sub, very last minute, like within hours, at most 24 hours before you find yourself in the pit playing a performance for the very first time. It's very unlikely you're going to get a rehearsal, as most Nutcrackers orchestras don't rehearse anyway. A Nutcracker orchestra is a special thing. It's a well-oiled machine in motion. They know all the cuts, the added measures, the repeats, etc. on autopilot. So having said all that, I would say as a sub, the most important thing to do is to prep yourself as best you can, and I will go over that, to stay on the train, as it were. So in this video, I have like a 3-part plan, I would say. The first part, I'm gonna go over how to prepare before you get that last minute panicky email saying, can you be at the performance tonight? It's in 3 hours or in 2 hours. I've gotten those emails. All freelancers get those emails. The other part I will go over is how to prepare after you get the email, and you know, if you get an email with some certain amount of time, like a week in advance, which is the most ideal thing as a freelancer. A whole week is a lifetime to prepare anything. So if you get an email in advance from a contractor, there are steps you could and should take to be the most prepared, because again, like I said, there's usually not a rehearsal. Even if you get a week's notice. The orchestra, in my experience, when I played in the Milwaukee Ballet, the first time we would all get together would be a performance, and then it just goes from there. So you need to be prepared and plan. And then the third part of this video, I'm just gonna go over some of the highlighted scenes that you really need to know, spend some extra time on, some parts that are exposed. And again, as a freelancer, a lot of things are out of our control. You're always just playing on the fly, last minute. But there are some things you can control, and so you really need to grab onto those and do them to the best of your ability. So let's dive in. Part 1 of this video, I'm going over how to plan before you get that last minute email to come sub on a ballet performance. So the first thing you need to do is get access to the parts to the complete ballet. That's very important in your prep. The suite, the collection of the most famous parts of the ballet, are readily available, and you've probably played them in orchestra already or even high school band, but you need to get the parts to the complete ballet. If you might ask your flute teacher, or if you know the flute players in your local ballet, ask if they could be willing to share those parts with you. But you also can go online to a site called IMSLP and go on there, and you have access to all 3 flute parts. International Music Score Library Project, that is IMSLP. A lot of free music on here. So you click that, the ballet, and then at the top, it'll have recorded performances available, and then down here, the music. You can get the full score or the parts. There's 62 parts. So you click on parts, and then at the top, the flutes are usually at the top. Flute 1, 2, and 3. All those parts, you click on that. And at the very top, it'll say your download will continue in 12, 11, etc. up there. Sometimes there's a disclaimer you have to click before it'll download, but I've already been on here. So it's downloading. And then you click to continue your download, and there you go. And there's all your parts. So anyway, it's 141 pages. Okay, so the couple things to consider with the IMSLP is most orchestras anymore are playing reduced versions with just 2 flutes. And so the second flute / piccolo part could be different than what's on IMSLP. Or I noticed on IMSLP that flute 2 part has a lot of piccolo parts that are actually in the 3rd flute part. But whatever, if you're practicing all the parts, when you get to play your real Nutcracker, you'll be familiar with all of it. So it doesn't really matter, but just know that the parts get rearranged and reorchestrated a lot in reduced situations. Okay, step 2 is simple. Get all your parts and just start practicing. Just start practicing what looks hard. So anything with 16th notes, of course, look at the Chinese dance for all the parts. And then the third step is to practice playing a complete ballet. Just pick one of the parts and play it with a recording. So you can go on YouTube and there are a lot of options. Go to YouTube and search the Nutcracker Complete Ballet. And there's a lot of just excerpts, but if you go to, this one's probably okay. It's the Russian theater. And then this one's the best. The New York City Ballet. So it should be about an hour and 30 at least. And then, you have the full length ballet. This other one, also by San Francisco, is good. And other than that, it's just excerpts, like the Nutcracker in 10 minutes, or I don't know what that is. Just the Russian dance, or just the pas de deux, just the candy canes, etc. So there's a lot of that. So you have to find one that's an hour and a half and it says complete ballet. Okay, so basically to summarize, your prep before you get any kind of a last minute email to sub is to get a hold of the parts, complete ballet, and practice along with a recording. It's a long, I know it's an hour and a half or so, but it'll be so worth it if you find yourself in the actual performance, which is what we hope to do. And like I said, it's going to be a last minute situation. So you'll be this is the best way to control the situation. All right, so do that. Now, the second part of this video is how to prepare after you get the email. So you've gotten the email, you have a decent amount of time to put in some preparation, like 2 days, a week, something like that. What do you do? So the best thing to do, and often this will happen automatically, but the personnel manager who hired you will provide you with a link to the parts, and sometimes even a link to that ballet company's performance recording. If you get access to those things, make sure you use them. Do not use your own parts that you've been using. Make sure you print out that ballet company's parts, because it'll have marked in there all the added repeats, which is going to happen in Nutcrackers. Everything's shifted around in the parts. You don't just read it straight down. So it'll have all the markings in there from the previous person. The order of the character dances. The character dances are Chinese dance, Arabian dance, the Spanish dance. So all that'll be marked. It's really crucial that you get used to the pacing of that, if you can. And then if you're able to play along with that company's recording from previous season, then you're golden. Then you're basically getting an experience like what it's going to be. You don't always get that. So if you do, make sure you take advantage of that. Print out those parts, play along with that recording. And then when you're sitting in the pit, getting ready, after you've done all that prep that I went over, and you're sitting in the pit getting ready for your first performance, I would check in with your section, whoever you're sitting next to, and just maybe double check that some of the stuff is written in there correctly. The biggest thing, I know I keep hounding on this, but it's really important, those character dances, the Chinese dance, Dance of the Mirlitons, Arabian dance, all that stuff, the Spanish dance, what order they are in. Because it's always changed around in every ballet company for the dancers, for the production. So check in on that. You might want to just ask, like, are all these repeats good? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything I need to know? Because it has happened where a sub will come in and ask that, and I would say, oh yeah, actually we do this bar for 32 extra measures. It's just not written in there because, I don't know, I just didn't even think about it. Because it's a new part now and it never got transferred over. Just check in with your section that you have all the information you need regarding cuts, added measures, all that stuff. Oh, and I would also say, when you're in the pit, do not use your own parts, or for sure don't use like parts you found on IMSLP in the performance. Use the part, they'll provide their company's original parts there. Use that. It's just standard operating procedure. You'll just look more professional if you use the parts that are provided. If you need to transfer some of your markings, like if you marked when to use thumb B flat or put some extra sharps in there just for safety, whatever, do that within reason. So you don't want to muddy up somebody else's part too much with markings that only apply to you, being a sub. And having said that, make sure you do not erase any markings that the previous flute player has put in there. If they have markings at all, like if they have a different system for writing B flat thumb on and B flat thumb off, you're just gonna have to leave it there. Worst case scenario, I would say if some marking really is distracting for you, erase it very lightly and make a note of it to yourself to put it back in there. I've only done that once where just some marking was really weird and I couldn't see the notes, so I had to erase it, but I made a note to myself to put it back in there. Because that'll for sure get you not hired again if you erase somebody's markings and then that person goes to play again and it's not there and they screw up. So just for an example, you see one of these parts, I attached here my part that I look at in the Milwaukee Ballet. They do a reduced version, so I'm playing second flute / piccolo, but this is my part for the Chinese dance. We start down here, and then you go up here and just all these markings. It's crazy. There's added repeats, and as my first time subbing there, I had to spend a lot of time playing with their recording and get used to that. So this is what you're really dealing with. It's not a clean copy. You've got all these extra pencil markings you have to deal with. One other note, just thought of it, is in ballet, you always have, just pay attention to the endings of every scene. Because the conductor is coordinating with the dancers for their last pose. So something like Trepak, you know, where it's going, and then at the very end, is typical how they do that. You don't just plow through like you would in normal orchestra. You have to make sure every single ending of every single scene, you're watching the conductor, because it'll be a weird, very unmusical, abrupt stopping, slowing down to accommodate the dancers. And if you're playing multiple nights, it's different dancers, so it could be a little different every time. Just something to be aware. That's ballet style, so just always at the endings, make sure you're watching the conductor so you don't play an extra solo. Okay, so in this third part, I'm just gonna briefly go over some of the highlighted parts, starting at the beginning of the ballet and just kind of scrolling down through and covering, you know, flute 1, flute 2, flute 3, all at the same time. Okay, so at the very beginning of the ballet, the overture, that's the flute 1 part, has a big solo right at the beginning, shown here at rehearsal A. It's not hard at all, but it really is exposed. In the third scene, the Petit Galop, this one, just be aware, this is after rehearsal 24. A lot of orcs, just check in with your flute section, what fingerings they're using. No one has ever, that I've ever encountered, uses the actual real fingerings on high G, F sharp G. They always do an alternate fingering. There's a couple different options. There's a few main alternate fingerings. Let me just grab a flute. This is just an old backup flute, but at where it starts, the G, F sharp, G, D pattern that keeps going. Yeah, you play C for the G, B natural for the F sharp, and back to C, and then a G for the D. That works. It's kind of out of tune, but when I subbed in Joffrey in Chicago, they did it that way. So if it's good enough for Joffrey, it's good enough for us. And I just want to point this out. This was crocheted for me to be a flute hat. Isn't that the most adorable thing? All right, and by scene 6, this is all still early on in the ballet. The flute player has a big solo, exposed solo, when in the ballet it's nighttime, Christmas Eve, and the dream scene, Clara is falling asleep and when the tree grows and all this. It's really a magical part in the ballet. And the flute has a big solo right at 65 here. It's not fast or anything. Listen to the recordings and see how that goes. It's also played along with a very exposed and really important part in the piccolo, which is here in the piccolo part. It's after 64. You just have this, it looks super easy, and it is, but make sure, this is where it's important to play along with the recording, because once you get to that spot, you need to practice making sure it speaks. It has to be there. So the main thing with subs, if somebody gets to that part and they're played in the wrong place, or that first high GF doesn't come out right, that will prevent you from subbing in the future more than anything else. So it's very exposed. You're just a little twinkle, like nighttime star twinkle sound. And don't worry about being too soft. I mean, it should ideally be soft, but it needs to be there at the right time with the notes speaking. So this is where you can practice with the recording coming in, and the ya da 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 da, and loud and like a trumpet. And also this other part after rehearsal 68, it's very difficult. Make sure you have a plan if you're going to do trill fingerings, what you're going to do through this very difficult passage. After 69, you have high G to A. So the next thing, the Waltz of the Flowers, or I'm sorry, the Waltz of the Snowflakes, which is Valse des Flocons de Neige, the Waltz of the Snowflakes. This is not difficult, but it's it's hemiola rhythms going through. And again, it's gonna be very much in your favor if you practice with the recording so that you get used to how it feels. It's just a weird feeling as you're playing it. Make sure at the beginning of Act 2, you have this god-awful B major scale, or it's an E major scale starting on B, starting here at rehearsal 2, and it just never ends. And in some orchestrations, it's the piccolo has to do that too. It's my least favorite part of the whole ballet. My only least favorite. I like the whole rest of it, but I hate that part. Okay, then we get into the character dances, and here we have Le Chocolat. So this is the Spanish dance, big trumpet solo. The flute plays a lot here too, but the biggest part, I think the most exposed, is the piccolo. So the piccolo will play this where it says number 12, and coming in there, pick up to 22. It's very exposed, so make sure you've looked at that. And then Chinese dance might be after that. Again, these are all in different orders, usually. But this has the big, famous flute solo, B flat major scale, going up to the high B flat. All parts have to play it, first, second, and third. A lot of orchestration parts, especially if it's a reduced orchestra, you're going to have to play that Chinese solo on the piccolo, which is quite difficult going up to the high B flat. And I think I showed you earlier my part, so I have to switch from flute 2, and play it on piccolo. After that, in this arrangement that I'm looking at is Dance of the Mirlitons. This is the big flute trio. It's very exposed. It looks very easy on paper, and it is. It is easy, but make sure you practice it with the recording. I keep saying this, so it's important, because it just keeps going, and there might be something in there, especially like coming back in after the rest. Here's for example, the flute 1 part. After rehearsal C and rehearsal D, you rest. You've been playing for a long time, and it's really easy to tune out. But really, really count very carefully, because then you have to come in at measure 60 here, and it's not always completely obvious. And the conductor is usually dealing with the stage, so he might not look at you. And if you don't come in, that's the worst offense you can make. The only other thing I would say, very end, and this is for the piccolo part, just when you think you're cleared all the hard stuff, at the very end of the whole ballet, you've got this really tricky entrance in scene 15, the final waltz, which is after measure 91, shown here. So right here at measure 91, the cellist plays the melody the little obbligato melody that you're going to play. Ya da 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 da, like that. And it sounds all cute. And then you've got to come in very nice and delicate and magical. And it's really difficult. So this, again, practice with the recording so that you're coming in exactly however many measures rest, play. That's what's important. So it's really easy to, well, it's not easy, but you practice it and you might like stumble on the high A F sharp and you just redo it, stumble on, you redo it. So you need to practice the entrance. So counting the rest, ya da 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 da. This is the cellist, da 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 da, play, ya da da da, play. You have to practice that. And then piccolo again, very important, these trills at 93, is that a 93? Yeah, rehearsal 93. Make sure you're trilling to E flat, and that the trills should gradually get louder. It's a beautiful phrase with trills. and have your, again, you're gonna have another G to A. There's a couple of these in this ballet, G to A on the piccolo trill, worked out. So if you don't have the, the C sharp trill key to be able to do that, you're going to have to work out another fingering. You have to have that worked out. Okay, so those are just the highlights, just real general, real quick, some of the, I think, the most important things that you should focus on as you're preparing for your first Nutcracker. All three parts are amazing to play, and as best you can prepare is going to make you feel as comfortable as possible. For more videos like this, please subscribe. Feel free to leave any comments. If you want me to cover specific parts, I'm happy to do that. And have a great Nutcracker season.